It's still relatively new tech, and so they're just kind of figuring things out. And there's been a learning curve for everyone and everything. Just like 10 years ago when we were first starting to set things up tubeless, we were just putting whatever we could try and just like see if we can make it work. Duct tape or Gorilla Tape in the rims, just this very like DIY setup. And that's like so much of the bike industry comes from that. But yeah, it's almost, I've had a lot of mountain bikes in the last 10 years, and I've had one flat on tubeless that's notable while riding. So it's a lot of miles, it's a lot of traveling, it's a lot of very extreme use. And so to have that little, and yeah, and there was, I was in Colorado riding gnarly trails on very old tires, and yeah, I totally get it. Like, I'm not surprised by that I got a flat that day. So, and then yeah, just threw more sealant in and it was fine. On the road stuff, because there's no debris. You're on the nicest possible surface to ride a bike on. And so, yeah, anytime I'm on the road, like, so thankful running those lower press, such a smoother ride. All right, so audio's, video's not. So I get to keep talking, people can hear me. I'm gonna go. Like a guitar. All right. Hey folks, TC here from Crank Revolution Bike Shop, and today we are here for our tubeless setup clinic. So tubeless setup, it's a kind of a newer tire and rim combination. It's come around really in the mountain bike world in the last like 10 years, and then road bikes realistically becoming popular in the last 2 to 3. So it is like a car tire. You have the rim, you have a valve, and you have the tire enclosed, and that's entirely your air chamber. So the inner tubes that we've all run for years and years, where that inner tube's held air and inflated everything, now that's gone. So tubeless is that more modern system. In the pros and cons, generally speaking, you're able to run a lower tire pressure. You have a sealant of some kind suspended within the rim itself, so that can help with punctures. Something that gets punctured, that sealant will coat and can reseal that tire, so you can ride through some rougher terrain. You're able to run, it's a lighter setup, generally speaking. So tubeless tires, what it takes to make them tubeless, which is a more coating, it's a different way of thinking about what a tire is, as opposed to just woven with a covering of rubber. Now we've got to have it be air permeable, or not air permeable, to be able to be set up and set to seal. And so it's a little bit heavier of a tire compound, but it does get more flex, more nice kind of ride quality feel because there's less restriction. That butyl rubber inner tube or latex inner tube is going to coat that outside and increase the rigidity of the tire. And so when the tire is able to move more freely, it's more kind of comfortable, more smooth contact to the ground. What I've got up here today is mostly mountain bike stuff, just because that's the more tried and true, more consistent. So my goal today, so I've got this fairly old mountain bike tire, but it's still got some life to it. I've got, this is actually a dead wheel. The axle's totally busted, but it's a, it's a good kind of set to see. This is something that's been set up, and I'll pass this around. It's been set up and run tubeless, for a number of years. And so you can kind of see that there's this kind of general grittiness to it, and that's that wet sealant that has dried up and hardened up. It's not totally hard, it's kind of gummy, rubbery. And so that's what, kind of what the rim starts to turn into when it does get used. Another thing that we have with that is if you take a look at the valve more specifically, so tubeless setups all have just a valve. This valve, which was connected to a tube previously, is now just a gateway for air to pass through that can open and seal, as a valve does. So I have, what's nice about that is I've got all the original parts to get that back to being brand new. So yeah, that rim strip in there. And so the rim strip is what's covering and coating and separating things between the rim and the tire. And so we're gonna use pocket knife here and just pop that rim strip out. A lot of stuff nowadays is using a tubeless tape. This stuff coming OEM from Specialized still has a hard kind of vinyl rim strip, which it's really nice from the mechanics world. A lot of times we get used to wrapping new tubeless tape. So I've got a new rim over here that's freshly taped. But that tape, anytime you have to change something, if you got to replace a spoke or something like that, you need to remove that tape and then install new tape. So it's kind of a little bit more to do. But yeah, so this dirty old rim strip that is kind of creased over and folded over and no longer even round is definitely a problem. So, and if we look at the rim here, you can see some of that kind of tubeless sealant that's hardened up over the years of riding. And so we're going to swap this out because I've got a fresh rim strip. And so this makes my life a lot easier for this class purpose, where I don't have to sit there and tape it. Tape here obviously comes in a number of different widths. That's much wider than these two. And so you want the rim width to match what the internal diameter of the rim is. A lot of stuff now, manufacturers have specs for all of this stuff. So there's 31 millimeter wide rims, there's 24, there's so many different options, but whatever rim you get or whatever wheel you have, it'll tell you generally in the specs what its size is. So these vinyl rim strips, which I like a lot, if you give them a little bit of an initial stretch to them, kind of loosen them up a little bit, just makes your life easier in terms of mounting it. When you are mounting it, you want to start at the valve and you want to put the valve in. So this, because it is kind of ready-made to work specifically for this rim and wheel setup, boop, dropping this in here is going to keep our place. So as I pull this along, otherwise it can shift and then be well out of position. So if we start at the valve and lock that in, it just keeps everything lined up better. All right, so we got that in. Stretch this a little around, get it off the free hub body. And then yeah, these are a very tight fit, so very tight fit. And so yeah, this does not feel good on your hands, but it's the most efficient way to do it. And so yeah, my fingers are very well pinched in there, but basically, yeah. So if we look from what this looked like in there to what it is now, much more uniform, much smoother surface. And so you can see that that tire is gonna have better contact there. One of the things that I also want to pass around is the old valve. So that old valve is gummed up. It's, it's got that sealant has gotten stuck inside the small moving parts. And so you don't, it's not going to get as much air when you do go to pump. It's got more restriction to it. And it's also just going to be generally used, And so I think that one might be a little bit bent too, which happens. But so now we got the new rim strip on, new valve in place. I don't know if this is actually going to work. I was trying this when we were setting things up, but I was still using the old stuff. And, it's one of those things where, yeah, using a floor pump, you've got a lot of stuff nowadays that does work with just that. But a lot of times having a compressor, some way to add air quickly. Because that's, once we get to this point of having the tire in place, and yeah, generally speaking, tubeless setup stuff is pretty tight fit. This one is definitely not the tightest. There's quite a bit of gap there. And that's part of it being a used tire. Newer tires, like what I have here in the box, nice, tight, strong fit. It's gonna be easier to set those tubeless once you get past the fact that they do come rolled up, and so they'll have a couple creases that you just kind of want to massage out a little bit. But yeah, let's see if we can get this to dry set. And so yeah, without putting any sealant in, a lot of times you can get things to start to build up pressure, and it's nice when it does because it gives you kind of more flexibility and control. And so yeah, this one is definitely just too loose. Trying a couple different little tricks, trying to get that air to stay in the rim. Yeah, it's just too loose of a set for this. Yeah, but with an air compressor, because you're able to force in a lot more air a lot more quickly, everything kind of expands and then grips pretty quickly there. And so yeah, let me throw some seal in there. Maybe we can make that work. But yeah. But so yeah, a lot of the bigger stuff with tubeless, yes, the initial setup is step one. But two, kind of when you have it, what does it look like? How does it function? How do you live with it? I think is the better way to look at it. So one of the things that we're using here, this is the muck-off sealant. This sealant, relative to the orange seal sealant, is a thicker, kind of heavier base. This, definitely pretty liquidy, pretty light. What we've found is that the muck-off is better in mountain bike tires. In that kind of lower pressure, higher volume area, this coats more nicely, more evenly. The orange seal sealant is much better in road. I've had a lot of success with this in road. I have not had a lot of success with this in road. Have also had plenty of success with this in mountain bikes. So this is this works more, in a lot of places we've had good success with it on both road and mountain. The muck-off sealant, on the other hand, we found really only works best in the mountain bike world. Oh, that's not opened. I thought that was already opened. All right, we'll use the pump. Shop stock, we now buy this by the gallon. For the home mechanic, that quantity doesn't make a lot of sense. Basically, by the time that you would need to use through all of this stuff, it's going to be mostly hardened up. So I'm going to go through, and this one, when it's brand new, you should get about 1 ounce per pump. This is no longer brand new, as that's almost empty. So you kind of just eyeball it. In a mountain bike tire, I've seen a range from 1 to 4 ounces for a 29 by 2.3, etc. tire size. Basically, yeah, there's 1.5 million different recommendations. If you have too little, you're going to find yourself, one, the tire will lose more air more quickly. What that sealant does is not only does it seal when things puncture, it also coats and creates an internal initial seal. So the tire does absorb some of the sealant. And so we found with some of the newer road stuff that more sealant was being absorbed than we thought, and we need to up how much sealant we're putting in. Sealant, you can add it like I did, just through the outside of the tire, and then you can put it back on. If it's easy to mount and unmount, that's a good option. If it's not that easy to set up, get it. Yeah, it's close. We'll see. I'll just pump for the next, we still got a half hour of this, 45 minutes. Just sit here, and it'll come eventually. It's a weird kind of a feel as you start to inflate it, when you can start to feel it take pressure and start to expand internally.
Is the sealant attaching the tire to the rim?
So it's not,
the
pressure is what's holding it. Yeah, the sealant's not gluing it. It's not a tubular, it's not that older system with, so both road and mountain, there were tubular rims. So the rim, or the tire was sewn with a tube inside of it. And so you would glue it on. And so yeah, the sealant's it's not a glue, it's not an adhesive. It's really just used to coat and then create that airtight seal. Yeah. And so little tools that I have up here, tire lever obviously is the best tool in my opinion to take the tire off. Something that if you do run tubeless that you'll want is a valve core removal tool. Park tool, they're less than 10 bucks. Or this is the Stans one. Basically what this does, select that old valve wherever it got off to. You know, with that valve that's pretty well gummed up and broken, we could actually just put a new valve core in. So this is something that every bike shop should have plenty of, because every time that we have a broken tube, realistically, more than often we can take the core out. And a lot of us, now that tubeless has become so popular, have started to kind of harvest those from dead tubes. Because yeah, it's a nice piece to remove and replace, because it actually does a really good job to just, you know, freshen up how that's fitting. And also, yeah.
So if the valve is getting like gummed up, having a hard time.
And yeah, you're having a hard time pump. Yeah, we can just swap the valve out, the valve core out real quick. And yeah, it's just quick and easy to do. And it's one of those things where, yeah, small valve, and yeah, the tubeless stuff, the sealant is meant to seal against air leaks. Well, when the air does leak out when you put the pump on, when you check it, things like that, that sealant gets into that valve, and then the small parts can get gummed up pretty good. Pros of, you know, mountain bike tubeless are really, like, that's really a big part of why this has become so popular. So for mountain biking, where we're typically riding off-road through, you know, nature settings with thorns and all of that, having that sealant in place does a really great job to, you know, keep you riding more. And, you know, with an inner tube, yeah, the moment that you get one thing through, you're done. But with the sealant, you can have, and there's plenty of videos online of people taking ice picks and other things and having a tire full and just jabbing at it, and you watch it seal. And then, you know, so there's a lot of thumbtacks. Mr. Lamb, do you have a question?
Yeah, we have a question online. Is it better off to pull the valve stem and use an injector?
Okay, so yeah, the question of, is it better to remove the valve, well, actually valve core is what you'd remove, you wouldn't remove the valve stem, and inject sealant through there, as opposed to how I did, just through the outside of the tire. It's one of those where, so if you have a tire that you're just adding sealant to, and not a brand new setup, that makes a lot more sense. Because when you are putting more air in, that bead will stay in place, you know, like we were talking about, it's locking into that edge of that rim. That bead will stay in place better, and so you won't have to go through the hassle of trying to put in as much air to get it to seat. Because it's already seated, you just want to add sealant. So yeah, for a new setup, it doesn't matter either way, because it's not really a big difference. I prefer to install it with the tire open, because I have a better idea of how much sealant exactly I'm putting in. When you have the little kind of hose and adapter, and you're pushing it through there, which actually, Mr. if you want to grab me one of those, that'd be great. Well, I guess that's what this is designed as. This one's just a straw that sticks on this.
When would you have to add sealant?
And so with a tubeless setup, every 6 months to a year. A lot of it comes to, there's, you know, small little details as to, you know, how well is it sealed, how well does it hold air, how, you know, all these little kind of.
If it starts losing air too often, that's kind of.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, yeah. If you have it where you've been running it for X long, and now you went from having to fill up your tires every week to now every ride, okay, cool. That's definitely where it's starting to, you know, have that change. So this here that I'm showing right now is how you would install sealant. This is still capped, so it's not actually going to pour. But so you would remove that valve core, fit that hose on in place, and then flip it in and press it through. But this one you have a harder time, especially with a bottle like this, measuring how much, you know, if you're trying to add 2 ounces to get that small mark, it's going to be a tougher read. So yeah, if you're doing a new setup, I highly recommend just putting it in fresh from the outside of the tire with something that's been run and been used. Yeah, using an injector of that sort would actually work nicely. Yeah. And so yeah, back to kind of the mountain bike conversation of why tubeless. And so you've got really just the ride quality is a lot better, and your flat resistance. Like those two things alone allow for this just really, it steps up the experience, steps up your abilities. Personal anecdote of 10 years of running tubeless on mountain bikes with many tubeless setups that were not tubeless ready. 10 years ago, you had maybe 10% of the market was available as tubeless ready tires and rims. Nowadays it's 95. It's pretty much all of the market nowadays is set for, even tires and rims that don't list that they're tubeless ready, generally speaking on modern manufacturers are. And that's just kind of the standard. That's where everything is. Yeah.
So if you run over something, will you still go totally flat for a moment? And then, I mean, you still put air in it, right?
So yeah, how the systems, expectation versus reality is always two kind of somewhat different things. Generally speaking, with a well set, tire with free floating sealant, sealant to go seal, your air pressure loss is not that great. Because that sealant rushes very quickly to that point, you can have it where you lose, on a mountain bike, even less than 5 psi through. Might not even notice, yeah. And so yeah, you can have some things that that puncture and seal incredibly quickly, but if it's noticeable where you have sealant that purges out, which is always exciting to see, your tire gets stabbed and you see this thing shoot out of it. It's going to be, there'll be some pressure loss, but it's not going to go to zero, realistically. And a lot of times, if that does, that's because you hit something pretty bad that tore, most of the sealant manufacturers talk about their, sizable area that they're trying to, produce this to seal. And most of them are about 1/4 inch in diameter. It's general rule of thumb, about that much. And so that's a pretty big puncture. If we talk about, most of what we see is, small glass fragments or thorn, pretty small. 1/4 inch is fairly thick. Miss Sam, if you could grab a dart as well, that's always a good thing to have that I forgot to grab. But so yeah, and that, when that larger than that 1/4 inch, then you're talking the dart tool. We talked about this in other classes, which is a tubeless tire repair, similar to what they do on a car patch. If you've ever had your car tire patched. This one's made specifically from stands. It's a really, really great tool. So this is a 2-time use tool when you first buy it. So you kind of hold their body and then 2 different darts. And so these, inside of that larger hole where the tire did go flat, you'll pop this in, break it off, and then you'll have that kind of tail sticking out. This piece with the kind of nice cloth is a chemically treated to both do a chemical seal and a physical seal. So yeah, they took a long time to put this out and produce this in the tubeless world, but it's been really, really well done. They have this, which is the the dart tool, and then they have the refill packs, which are 5 of the little darts that you can pop back in. So something that just nice, small, and easy, compact, but can save your tire in the long run. When you would use something like the dart tool on the road, you'll definitely need some way to reinflate. And so a lot of the tubeless stuff, a lot of questions I get is about CO2 and reinflating tubeless. So there was a time when CO2, the compounds couldn't seal in a CO2 environment. That's getting better now. And so most of the stuff now is able to be used. So you don't have to carry a big pump. A lot of times if you have a CO2 cartridge, you can reinflate enough with that. Which is, as we all have done with the road and stuff, just nice, small, compact, good to use, cartridge at a time. But the pumps are still, if you have a pump, you can always try and inflate air. Something that's a CO2 cartridge, once that cartridge is spent, you're spent. So, yeah, there's always a trade-off there. Yeah, any other questions? Anything?
You mentioned running lower pressure.
Yeah, running lower pressure. So yeah, other pros of mountain bike tubeless is it expands your ability to run lower tire pressures. So lower tire pressure on a mountain bike talks about a wider platform, better traction, better grip. Kind of the tire is more connected to the ground at a lower pressure. How low is too low? Anytime you're contacting your rim over a bump, that's too low. So you want to find that kind of that gray area where you're able to have good tire contact and not be damaging any of the mechanical parts. And so that's what's nice about it, because previously if you ever did contact the bottom out that tire, that was when you get like a pinch flat and you get the snake bite, kind of 2 holes parallel. And so it allows you the flexibility to run a lower tire pressure without having that cost of potential more flats. So do you need to worry more about punctures in rougher terrain or burping the tire? So that's kind of 2 separate things. Depending on where you ride, is where punctures come in. So living out in Utah, we had goat heads. So goat heads are small little small little thorny pieces that get into. You'll go through a patch and you'll have 12 of them stuck in your tire. And with a tube, it's best to just leave them in because they will cut and stick and then maintain pressure. And the moment you take it out, you're going to lose it. With the tubeless stuff, punctures are going to happen. That's not something that the tire has, the tire being tubeless or not has really any say in. Punctures are going to happen, but with the tubeless, you have that free-floating sealant in there to seal and lock in when it does. So it allows you the flexibility to get past that. Burping the tire. So burping the tire is a uniquely tubeless set where you will basically separate the tire contact from the rim while riding, and it will shoot out some air, shoot out some sealant. Burping the tire is something where, if you're running a lower pressure, that's more of a risk. Basically, you're able to put more flex, more pressure on the tire itself relative to the rim. And so, being a lighter rider, I've very rarely burped a tire. Heavier riders, it's more common. It's also one where, if you're, a lot of times what you'll get is a puncture first that drops your tire pressure down, and then you'll burp it because you're ripping it through, on a turn. It's one of those things where it's, not all of that common anymore. It's, it definitely happens, but it's something where, with running proper tire pressures, that's kind of not really, doesn't pop up too much, especially with how nice tire and bead, tire and rim bead kind of connections have gotten. But yeah, good question. Doris, do you have any questions?
Sorry, I'm late.
That's fine, yeah. No, that's all good. It happened. Took you around. Yeah. So one of the things I kind of showed everybody was how this rim and wheel looks with the that vinyl rim strip. This is a nice carbon wheel from Specialized that's brand new, and so we've got brand new fresh tape in there, and so that rim tape, this stuff being perfectly fresh and new, it's even, it's flat, it's going to have a good kind of contact. And then, we've got this older rim strip here that is twisted, bent, and creased. So those creases are definitely going to cause where, sealant and air can go into the rim from there. And so, this, just needs to be replaced, and it's not going to work well otherwise. But the tapes, when you install them fresh, it's great. After you've taken the tire on and off a few times, you've kind of shifted things around. The tape, just as this has gotten beat up, gets beat up as well. And so the tape is something where if you're kind of putting on new tires, just always evaluate what you're looking at. And if it looks nasty, crusty, and old, best to replace it, because you're going to replace tubeless tape in 2 rims for, I guess we don't have a tag. Oh, $15. $15 to cover 2 rims. So, low cost, but definitely a high reward on what you're getting back. Actually, I'll grab that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot you're probably actually talking about that. How often should you switch it out? Is there a need to switch it out?
We're talking about the rim tape.
Problems? Yeah.
And so that's I'm a big believer in that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But a lot of times if you're putting a new tire on, that's always a good time to evaluate and kind of see how it looks. If it looks like that twisted and you can see gaps into the rim, that's going to cause a problem. Best to replace it then. But so if it's working, there's no point in taking a system that's been functioning perfectly well, taking it apart. As preventative maintenance for tubeless rim tape solely leads to over maintenance. You just need to do more of it because the act of when you think about putting the tire lever in there, you're jabbing against that rim tape. You're scratching, you're scoring it, you're opening it up to the elements more. So you'll kind of cause that need by worrying about it too much. But refreshing sealant, every 6 months to a year, depending on how much you ride and how well things seal.
Are tubeless tires thicker, or do they have a longer mileage lifespan?
So are tubeless tires thicker, and do they have a longer life? Basically, that's in 2 parts. So one, they are kind of thicker. Basically, they have a added level of coating to make them more airtight. A lot of the older tires, especially some of the stuff that I run, has near transparent sidewalls, so it's super thin, super minimal. Just trying to do really the threads are holding it together. So there's more coating, there's more more mass to it. But then in terms of wear life, like with all tires, you have tires that are made to have super high wear life and super low, super tacky. And so you'll get that same kind of a range of 700 to 2,000 miles out of a tire is not uncommon. Mountain bikes, it really kind of comes to when you destroy it. You can tear some knobs off on rocks on a brand new tire. It happens, and so it's something where, the wear life it's not any longer. But it's definitely has that same kind of different varying levels of what goes into it.
Do those tire levers damage carbon wheels when you take them off? Should you use
These do not. Tire levers and carbon rims have always been nerve-wracking. Once you've done it for as long as you just throw it in there. I don't know anyone, and this is 15 years of bike shop experience and lots of time in the industry. I don't know anyone that has broken a carbon rim with a plastic tire lever. That's like just going through, checking down, making sure. The steel ones, the metal, yeah, absolutely. Oh, you can totally, you can do a lot of damage with that. But yeah, with the plastic ones, and Pedros does do a lifetime guarantee on these, and so I break one of these about every 1,000 tires that I change. So yeah, quite a few. It's something where this, $5 for a pair. When they break, okay, cool. I'm glad that broke. And not anything, everything else is more expensive to break. So it's that, yeah. And a lot of times if you're breaking tire levers, you have certain things that are just unset nicely on the rim. Whenever we're, kind of taking that tire on and off, when that bead gets locked in, breaking that bead free, because the tires, the rim's built up more there. So in that middle channel, you'll get the easiest to get the tire on and off, easiest to maneuver it, easiest to manipulate it. And so it just kind of, works nicely once you kind of separate things as opposed to allowing them in there full. Yeah.
So this is my first season with Tubeless. Is there any considerations in the winter with temperatures?
That's a great question. Thank you. That question was, wintertime tubeless, tire pressure changes based on how cold it gets, but also just the sealant in general. So, cold weather riding, like all of us are moving a little bit slower today because it dropped like 40 degrees. Your sealant is going to be moving a little bit more slowly. It's not going to be as viscous. It's not going to be as, as fluid, as nice and easy to move around. So there is a, kind of reduction of all of those things. Things do harden up and slow down. You're more apt to get some of the problems that we do have. And that's also true with just riding with tubes. One of the best lubricants for cutting rubber is water. Well, that's unfortunate because, it gets wet out, especially in the winter. If you freeze thaw cycles, things are more wet than, more than summertime dry. So there's just more debris, there's more out there. Those things still happen. The big thing with tubeless is, for a lot of us who don't ride our, summer bikes or, nice light road bikes in the winter as often as we do in the summer, the sealant that is a nice liquid right now can harden up, like we looked at on that rim strip. And it's also when it sits like this one has been for the last 20 minutes, all that sealant is just pooled down here now. And so the ideal thing to do would be, anybody's got like a watch, watch winder that keeps your automatic watches, in time. Yeah, if we had one of those that just kept the wheel spinning gently, just enough, just turning enough. And so that's, you can, to just look at your bike, pick it up, spin those tires, does a lot. If you do it once a week and everything maintains a nice seal, and throw some air in if you're going to store it for 3 months, throw some air in periodically. That's great. If you don't have the wherewithal or the thought process to do that, and it all just pools to the bottom and hardens up, and we're starting out next season, it doesn't make any sense for your bike shop to scrape out all of that old gunk. The time that will cost the rider exceeds the value of most any tire. A lot of shops do it like $80 to $100 an hour, and you got tires at $60, $70 that are good quality. So the good kind of start fresh for the year, and I'm a big fan of just throw new tires on. New tires, new sealant will be a great way to kind of refresh your bike. One of the things for me with mountain bikes is kind of the grippy, tacky feel. Brand new tire is going to grip and feel a lot better than a year-old tire. And it's something where, I ride a lot of bikes. It's very apparent how slick some of my stuff gets when I have not ridden it for 3 or 4 years and go take it out for a day. It's rough. So yeah, newer tires are nice. So that's my, wintertime. If you can keep air in it, keep things moving, keep everything, kind of refreshed, that's great. If not, it's not a big deal. You can just put a new tire on and put new sealant in and start over the year, which is a great way to start the year. And so I know some folks that try to do where they do new tires every year, and they start a set and they try to wear them out. If it's expected 2,500 miles out of it through the year, okay, cool. You do that many miles on that bike, so you feel good in terms of having it worn through. Mr. Lamb, or moderator.
Question: how often do you recommend adding sealant, and what if you mix brands of sealant?
Okay. And so the question was, how often do we add sealant, and what about mixing of brands? So if we have that this is maybe a little bit too thin and this is too thick, do we combine them to the greatest sealant ever? I haven't tested that specifically, but there is some. I haven't had any issues mixing sealants. It's not something that we do all the time, but I've got plenty of riders that drop their bike off for us to refresh their sealant. I have no idea what they used initially or what's been added, and so I just put in what we have, and it works. Sealants are kind of sealants. Some brands don't make quality sealant. I'm not going to name those specifically, but there's things that I don't use. There's things that I do and things that I don't. Mixing of sealants, not a big deal. Refresh is one of those kind of variable rates, based on how quickly that tire is losing air. If it's going from, you got to fill it up every week to every day, then that's something, okay, cool, look at putting more sealant in, because that's just going to help to seal it better. Yes, and then overall, just generally speaking, 6 months to a year. That's what most manufacturer recommendations are, and it works out pretty nicely. If you do it once a year, cool, you do it in the spring every year, cool, that makes a lot of sense, so, yeah. He's doing weird hand motions.
So someone had half a bottle of sealant and it looks like it's starting to gum up. It's probably gone bad, better to get something new.
I'm trying to think, I had a bottle of Stan sealant that was 4 years old and had been traveled around the country that still worked just fine. So there's a lot of things. If you leave the cap off, those things, that's obviously going to get it to wear out faster. But as long as if it's moving nicely in there and you shake it up, and it should work. I haven't seen a 2-year expiration date on something like this, and then you try it out and it just doesn't. I haven't seen that. Doesn't mean it. A lot of this stuff, the technology we've talked about here is 2 to 10 years old. So there's a lot of things that are still kind of being figured out, and it's so quickly changing and changing over. That there's a lot of things that were true 10 years ago that aren't now. 10 years ago we tried to put Mavic Caserium, which is a nice light road rim, but they had a fully enclosed aluminum outer rim. Put a valve on that, so it's not a tubeless ready rim. Put a Continental Gator screen on there, not a tubeless ready tire, and the front held, but the rear didn't. And so it's almost the front was held and was rideable. The rear we just couldn't get to sit for more than an hour. And so it's one of those things where this was the experimentation, just throwing things together.
Oh, not even with the rider?
Not even with the proper stuff. Yeah, just trying it. We're in a shop, we're bored, and we have we've got these things to put together, and we'll see if they work. But in doing that, we learned a lot. That's how we figured out that this sealant works better for us and our experience on the road stuff at the higher pressure, where the thicker is a little bit better in the mountain bike stuff. Those little things are kind of, I haven't seen anybody that had a definitive list of everything, so it's a lot. It's a lot to do. Rim strips, rim tape, tires.
I've heard people saying that they'll carry a tube if they get a puncture that just doesn't seal. They put a tube in. Would that work?
So that works a lot better typically on the road than it does on the mountain bike. Like we talked about with mountain bikes and thorns. So the tubeless will seal up, and you can have thorns actively in a tire that you never notice because it's sealed and you just kept riding with it. So if you're going to put a tube into that mountain bike tire, you got to get everything out. And it's dirty, it's messy, it's gross. You're on the road. It's not the most it's worth a try, but it's something that's kind of fraught with peril. On the road side of things, yeah, I do carry a spare tube with me when I ride on the road, with an inflator, all that's, my typical kind of flat kit, because you really have like one thing that you can pick out and then move forward. It's not as loaded up.
So would that dart thing you showed us be the more appropriate, like rather than carry a tube for either a road or a mountain?
And so my experience, this is definitely better in the mountain bike world. It comes down to the pressures, the size of these things. The smaller road tires can have somewhat of a problem with this, just because it's trying to get up to that super high pressure. And so it's got to be like the perfect shape in terms of what cut it for that to work nicely in a road. So yeah, I would say kind of my experience, a dart for the mountain bike and gravel world, and a tube for the high pressure road world. That's kind of what I think is, been best for me.
It's just probably be like one thing you have to buy.
Yeah, just kind of one. Yeah, you're not going to have a road tire that's nearly as loaded up as, especially a smooth slick. You can see a lot more sticking in and out of it than you can with how many angles and grooves that has. And so yeah, but it's either way, having a tube's a good idea. Yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, putting a tube into what was freshly is gross. There's just sealant everywhere. You got to pull the valve out, pocket the valve, make sure you don't lose that, because valves come in a varying array of colors and fun things. So yeah, you don't want to lose your green valve, because not everybody has those. So yeah, pocketing that saves you a couple bucks, and then putting that new tube in as you would anyways. It usually works, but it's a mess.
Can you patch it? Can a patch kit?
So we'd be patching the tire.
Yeah, like the end.
And then with the sealant, the patch really doesn't have anything to stick to. That's where, the dart is kind of your. I'm trying to think if I've seen anybody produce like a tubeless tire boot. Yeah.
Like to get you by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't. I mean, I'm sure people have done, candy wrappers and things that have worked in the past. Yeah, but that's the tube is the interior of that, which is pressing against the dollar bill, as opposed to an airtight seal.
Yeah.
So candy wrapper might work.
You can really hold it on there. And air. Yeah, okay.
So and then with just how the texture of the sealant, it's very hard for things to stick to it. So yeah, that's where the dart comes in. Rim tapes, valve core tool.
If you're unsure about the condition of your sealant, do you add the recommended amount for that tire size? Just a little bit?
Yeah, so Nick's question, if you're unsure about the condition of your sealant, how much do you add? And so a way to evaluate the condition of your sealant is can you hear it? If you can hear liquid sloshing around in your tire, you have fresh sealant. You know that. If it doesn't have any of that sound, doesn't have any of that feel, you can always open it up and look into it too. So if you don't have that, how much do you want to add? And this is something where you'll have the racers, the weight weenies for like minimal half ounce, and it's something where if you're gonna go through the trouble of opening something up or putting sealant in, always put at least an ounce. Fat bike tires that are 4 and 5 inches wide. There's nothing that you're going to do in something like that that's going to be less than like 3 ounces at a time. It's just with the volume that you have, having that up and running with a fair amount of sealant floating through is a really big difference. So how much to add? At least an ounce. Larger the tire, the larger the volume of sealant. I haven't ever seen anybody that kind of came in with like a road tire that was just sealed. I think it's good. We're just going to use just sealant. It's just, they're riding on liquid at this point. I haven't seen that yet. I'm kind of curious too. My buddy did once put water in somebody's tube and then patch that tube and send them out. It was the owner's bike. So, those things happen in bike shops, and it's really weird riding a water tube. But so, it's one of those things where, how much to add. Every manufacturer's going to have a recommendation. They'll have something for you, but it's at least an ounce. At least that you have free-floating sealant in there, something that can go to the problem spot when it does arise. That's the big thing is, just having that tubeless fresh ready to go. Yeah, like I said, personal experience of 10 years of riding and like one notable flat, and it was entirely my fault. 2 years old, out of state, traveling around with very old tires, it was going to happen. But yeah, with fresh new stuff and a decent amount of sealant, it's very rarely an issue. So, anybody else? Yeah, we covered a lot.
Is the orange seal going to move around inside the tire easier than the muck off?
Yes, yeah, this just comes to the viscosity of it. But I've noticed that I feel like the muck off seals better with kind of mountain bike pressure and size once it gets there. Yeah. Yeah, and so yeah, also yeah, I don't feel that it is valuable to scrape old sealant out. If you want to, you can. But also that old sealant that you're scraping out was part of the seal. You know, that was part of. So as you know, sealant solidifies, it's scrapey. That's my jazz hands. That was kind of more angled there. But so yeah, old sealant does solidify and harden up, and you'll have what used to be called stanimals. So they were small geometric shapes that would grow out of their latex sealant. But yeah, you scrape that stuff out, but then you need to re-add more, and the tire's probably old enough already. So yeah.
What about the sealing? Is that poisoning or cancerous? Do they say anything on that?
I mean, obviously it says don't ingest. You know, that's a pretty well. Yeah, it's so it is so some of them have been ammonia based and latex based. So if you have allergies to those things, yes, that can be a problem. I hope not.
Yeah.
We'll find out. But it's, yeah, I mean, latex is pretty harmless.
Yeah, latex is not.
Yeah. Ammonia for most people is pretty harmless. So yeah, I nothing that I know of, and doesn't mean that there can't be, but you know, yeah, fair question. Yeah, if there was something, I'm sure that would be widely spread, and yeah. All right, so just 5 minutes left. I mean, all right, so when we wrap this up and we cameras off, we'll go and we'll make sure that this works. Because I feel defeated, but it was once where I wasn't going to try and put a hole in the ceiling and run that airline tonight. I wasn't going to do that. I mean, we'll do that eventually. We want to do it right on that corner, but just tonight, but I'm tired. There's a lot, you know. And yeah, this is also something that, yeah, no one should ride this wheel because the axle is just roasted. Yeah.
Might be easier to get it to see if you had a pump with.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So there are. Oh yeah. Thank you. All right. So yeah, having problems seating a tire because yeah, this does not transmit a fair volume of air quickly. You're pumping in each pump. That's all you get. There are tubeless setters. So as opposed to using an air compressor, which is what we use in the shop, there's tubeless setters that are just a air chamber. So you put your pump onto it, lock it on, and pump up the air chamber. And so a lot of those, Specialized makes the big bore, I think is what they've called their tubeless set. And so it's just a volume of air that you get to fairly high, 150 PSI, and then you plug that chamber, which has its own hose, onto this, and then open it up, and all of that air rushes in. And so that high volume of air coming at a high velocity helps to expand this and set everything into place.
What's the best thing to have like with you?
Well, so like with you on the road would it'd be like a CO2 or a mini pump, because what you're trying to do on the road, you're not really trying to set the tire, you're trying to inflate the tire.
Right.
And so just to add some air. And so here where we can actually look entirely into that tire and see that valve there. Yeah, we don't have a great fitment here. And so what you need is that volume of air to expand that tire and lock it into place.
In that case, the CO2 is fine, because you were saying before that
The CO2 doesn't have enough of a volume, generally speaking. Those big bore ones I'm talking about are, they're sizable.
What about for a road-sized tire?
And so yeah, road size should work, but it's a higher pressure. It's all in process. And yeah, if you're out on the road with a flat, whatever you have is what you're going to try. And what you should have is at least some way to fill it up. Thankfully, like rideshare programs have made getting picked up from a bike so much easier. there's a lot that kind of goes in. So working with having something out there, and yeah, the CO2 is my preferred, just because it's smaller and lighter and more minimal. But yeah.
You don't think one of those could set it up like
So
something larger?
I had this set because there are plenty of times when I can, I'm fairly certain that with this tire on that rim right now, I could. But I don't want to make that messy. So yeah, it's messy, it's new. But it's, the new fitment of that stuff is pretty good. Yeah, this tire is more worn out than I thought it was. And so yeah, a lot of times, yeah, you can set it with, with just a pump at this point. That's the, 10 years ago, that would, no chance. Also, yeah, something we didn't talk about is when we're doing the rim tape, if you are using rim tape, at least 2 layers. There were brands that might have had lawsuits because they needed more than 2, and things had blown off of certain rims because they were requiring 5. And so, yeah, why 2 when you can do just 1? Well, just 1 because, whether you're talking about with the tire lever, things, having 2 layers of this, it's more sealed, it's more protected. Putting the tire on with just 1 layer, you can shift that 1 layer over and cause a problem. Having 2 is going to kind of hold everything in place. Don't forget, though, that every layer that you add increases that diameter of that rim slightly, by the thickness of the tape all the way around. And so that's why taking out the old tape and putting in new tape and not just stacking more and more and more and more, because it's going to get impossible to mount that up. And yeah, the kind of the depth here between the rim bottom and the bead, it's definitely something where building that up can cause problems. But there is, 2 layers is a very fair number to really always use. Works nicely. God, we are so professional here. All right, so yeah, that is kind of what we have for today's class on Tubeless. With the folks that are here live, we're going to go across to the shop area and use the compressor and redeem myself in my failure of setting this one up Tubeless today while talking. But so yeah, TC from Crank Revolution, thanks for showing up for those who came on the live stream. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok. What else do we have? That's everything.